Thank you to Casual Connect for letting me speak today. Thank you for all of you attending. I wanted to speak about programmatic because it's quite an interesting concept. A lot of publishers and advertisers have a hard time understanding what it is. In order for me to do that, I need to take you through what we do as a company and how we're trying to bridge the gap between programmatic and social. So, MoPub is a company that was acquired by Twitter in November 2013, and it is the biggest ad server and largest repository of publishing inventory in mobile right now. Our marketplace basically hosts almost 18.5 billion auctions monthly in APAC alone. So this gives you an overall breakdown of how many impressions are coming through our exchange. Quite clearly, you can see here that there's 58 billion sitting in North America, about 19 billion in EMEA, and then 18.5 billion in APAC, and so forth. This was December. This is where we are today. So essentially, you can see there's 130 billion monthly ads going through the ecosystem within MoPub. 97% of all publishing inventory in MoPub is in-app. One of the challenges that we have in Asia is that we're still on this cusp of getting publishers to understand, these are large publishers, not necessarily just game publishers, to understand that they need to think about in-app advertising and in-app native apps. The reasoning, as I'm sure you all know from the gaming industry, is that there is a multitude of things that you can do when you're in-app versus a mobile web page. We host 1 billion unique visitors coming through our exchange and our ecosystem. And our advertisers are not direct advertisers, they are actually demand-side platforms, DSPs. MoPub Publisher Platform. I'm sure some of you will completely understand some of the apps that we're hosting here. This is just a fraction of the apps that are being hosted currently through MoPub. You can see clearly we have breadth of publishers and have started to bring publishers in region. And the challenges that we see here are essentially getting publishers to think about not just MoPub, but any other programmatic play that you have. So you can be working with any of the other ad networks who are piped in to some of the DSPs, and you can be thinking about how you can buy, as an advertiser, through the DSP, how you can buy inventory in real time. You're going to say to me, but why? Why does that really make a difference? Let's think about Flappy Birds. And let's think about the prior meeting that you just had, which was with Amazon. They really talked about getting to the customer right at the point of time that they've downloaded the app. That's the point in time that you can actually deliver on achieving publisher monetization and in making sure that there is a deep engagement with some of the publishers and some of the users that you have. So just to give you an overview, these are some of the leading DSPs that we're currently working with, and I can see there's a few in the room that we're actually speaking to. I wanted to give you an overview on one of the case studies we had with Halfbrick, which sits in Australia. Halfbrick came to us and basically wanted to understand what programmatic was and how they could utilize this. And we basically sat down with them and gave them an assessment on what programmatic really means to their business. It's about driving app installs if you're an advertiser, and it's about making sure that you're delivering on the ROI that you receive as a publisher. Not just going to 1, 2, or 3 ad networks, but really thinking about a yield management solution that can ensure that you get the right type of monetization as a publisher. So in this scenario, Halfbrick, which is operating out of Australia, actually grew their revenue from 98,000 to 227,000 through us. That just gives you a quick overview of what programmatic can do. It doesn't necessarily have to be through MoPub, it can be through other vendors. At the end of the day, many of the DSPs are plugged into multiple sources or multiple SSPs. So you have the ability to try and get to the user experience and also the download, the ability to actually get many users coming through to you from DSPs. The other case study I wanted to take you through was Songza. I'm not sure if anyone knows, but at the moment we're Twitter is in discussion at the moment to acquire SoundCloud. There's just discussion stage at the moment, but you can understand what's going on in the industry. We're thinking about music, we're thinking about entertainment, we're thinking about how we share information across some of the apps, and we're actually trying to engage social with entertainment, with apps, and mobile, because at the end of the day, whether you're a mobile custom utilizing Twitter or not, there's going to be some engagement and interplay, especially when you're thinking about programmatic, because in the programmatic world, everybody tends to work with each other. They have to. So in this scenario, Songza basically increased their revenue by 42%. And real time for them actually represents 30% of their ad business, which is quite impressive given that real time has just come to fruition a few years ago on desktop. So thinking about it from a mobile first product, it's quite interesting to see that we've seen this shift happening. So taking some summations from this, in Q3, MOPA realized that there's a couple of things that are happening in the ecosystem. Consumers are rapidly adopting smartphone and tablets for internet access outside of the workplace. We know this in Asia. Mobile apps are an increasing share of time spent on mobile as they provide the best experience for consumers and marketers alike. We also know that. We're also seeing in Asia many people move away from a desktop experience alone to a hybrid experience. Or in some cases, in emerging Asia, we're seeing the mobile become the new device that is the first device for people to get onto the internet. So we're really, really thinking about this from a holistic overview of what the users are doing and also what our publishers are doing in terms of engaging and monetizing effectively through programmatic buying. So now that I've confused you about programmatic buying, RTB, DSPs, I wanted to really talk to you about what it is and what really it means to the average Joe. I normally surmise this through one movie. Has anybody seen Moneyball? Great. Okay, you've either seen it because you love baseball or you're a great Brad Pitt fan like myself. I was sitting watching this movie on my way to the UK, and I realized something quite interesting. This movie is about baseball. So for those who haven't seen it, it's ultimately about baseball, and it's ultimately about Brad Pitt in this movie having a certain amount of money that he has to spend in acquiring new baseball players. So normal, you'll see that in English Premier League, you'll understand what that really means. But his money that he has, or his budget, has to be utilized in a way that gives him the ability to try and win at least a few games. He knows he's not going to be able to play like the major leagues. So why not think about how we can utilize that money and in the most effective way? So in this film, you basically have Brad Pitt looking at ways that people are playing, pitching, what their statistics are like in terms of playing the game and what they're actually bringing to the table, not as individuals, but as a group. And he utilizes this budget in a way that allows him to bring on mediocre to semi-decent players, because he knows that if you put these players together, they might actually be players that can win one or two tournaments. Very interesting, because I sat back and I thought, I really don't understand baseball. Through and through, I love football, so that the movie didn't resonate with me on that front. But what did resonate with me was how it actually is very similar to what's happening in advertising. We're thinking about this in a way where we're actually holding the budget, we're the advertiser or we're the app developer. We only want to go and acquire a certain amount of users, but we don't know how we're going to acquire them. And we don't know if those users are actually going to download the game. So in this scenario, programmatic actually comes into play. So programmatic takes into account all the algorithmic statistical propensities of somebody who's going to click or convert or even download the app and try to almost predict whether this person or this impression will actually result in a click or a conversion. And so that's exactly how I define programmatic advertising. It's utilizing machine algorithmic learning computing to be able to try and understand Should I buy this audience or should I buy that audience? If you only have $1 in your pocket and you need to buy something that's going to feed your stomach, are you going to actually find something that's $1, or are you going to actually think about other variables? You know, what actually is going to satisfy me? What actually is going to give me the kick at that right time? These are similar concepts. And if we take those everyday concepts and put them into advertising, we're actually starting to understand what programmatic can mean. So I've put get real there because, as we know in everyday business, any business that you're in, you're always going to have or be held accountable to a certain budget. And so what we're saying here is utilize that budget in a way that makes sense. Finding the real-time audience. What does that mean? How do you know who Joe Bloggs is? So this is using multiple layers. So DSPs in particular use signals to be able to identify who is going to click, who is going to convert, and who is going to use my game. And in some cases, do I want to buy an audience that is actually going to spend money within the game? It's not just about advertising. So there's real ways that you can do this through data mining. And that's what we're really talking about through DSPs. Know your audience. How many people have not played Candy Crush? Wow, I'm surprised. I'm surprised. Okay, that's good to know. There's about 5 or 6 hands that went up. The reason I brought up Candy Crush was because obviously it's been explosive, especially when it comes to casual gaming. Who knew at the time the game was made that this was going to be a movement or a audience that was fit for mothers? This game has exploded with people who had some time that they could play in between. It wasn't a intelligently mind-boggling game. It was something that you could play and aspire to. Who knew that that was going to happen? So here we're saying know your audience. I just came back from Bangkok, and it was quite interesting. As I was shopping through one of the supermarkets, I noticed that there was a fruit snacks box displayed at Central Mall. So whilst I went in to look, I realized that the image that I was seeing was actually from Candy Crush. So Candy Crush Saga is now being used from an online basis to an offline basis. So that's starting to resonate with their audience. Mothers are now engaging with it, thinking, okay, I'll buy this fruit snack versus someone else. So what we're saying here is know your audience and maximize that knowledge that you know who your audience is and start going after that audience. Who knows what movie this is? Yes, correct. This movie is Minority Report. So essentially, the movie must have come out almost 10, 15 years ago. I can't remember. But in this movie, what tends to happen is Tom Cruise is a policeman, if you like, who has the ability to think that somebody's going to commit a crime and try and stop them committing that crime. And he utilizes multiple layers of data that are going through his computing to be able to identify who is going to commit that crime right now at this particular time. I tend to use this to actually talk about how we're trying to find our audience. How do you know a particular person is going to buy or purchase the game, maybe not give it to themselves, maybe they'll buy it for somebody else? How do you know all these different types of layers of information? You don't. It's impossible. But by using machine learning and getting historical information into play, you can start to uncover who this person might be. You may not know their name, you may not know where they are, but you know that they might click or convert according to what their previous historical information was. So, in summation, real-time bidding for app developers, what does that mean? It allows app developers to bid for inventory, impression by impression. You no longer have to buy blocks of inventory where you go to an ad network and have $5,000, that $5,000 spent, and you have to spend it on a particular publisher or a particular way of buying media. You can buy it impression by impression, which is great because it means you're not paying one block price. You're paying according to when that impression is coming in. So the impression can come in at a high eCPM or a very low eCPM. And using algorithmic learning, you can buy the audience at the time that makes sense for you and also at the cost that makes sense for you. Gives app developers a chance to buy the right audiences and build user acquisitions in real time. So again, by having multiple a multitude of impressions coming in through one DSP or multiple DSPs, you can start buying impressions that make sense for your business from anywhere. They don't have to be a specific audience from Yahoo or from Google or from Twitter. They can be multiple variations of where those users come from. And this is quite important for anybody when it comes to gaming especially. You have no idea how quickly your game is going to actually make traction in the market or in the app stores. So by staying topical and knowing that, okay, your game is featured in the, as one of the games in the App Store today, you can make sure you maximize on that by going out and actually acquiring audiences at the right time. You don't have to go in and 2 weeks in advance and get an IO cut to talk about where you should buy the inventory and how it's going to scale up. That takes time and you've lost your momentum. So here we're really talking about how you can identify ways that you can uncover information. Okay, so quickly, advertising programmatic trends in gaming. Obviously, the first one we talked about, explosive growth in mobile. Taking a slide from Mary Mika's deck, I don't need to really go through this. We all know this and see this in Asia. Okay, talking about publishers, many game publishers in particular don't want to have ads showing in their apps for many reasons. It sort of interferes with the app, it interferes with the game, it interferes with the user engagement. Here, we're seeing something that's changing that. Mobile advertising is getting better. What do we mean by that? We're talking about native. In this particular example, you can see here native has been ingrained into the game, and the app actually is hosting multitude levels of of showing and resonating that particular advertising unit. So you can see quite clearly here, as you enter the game, you have the ability to put in brand recognition advertising. You have the ability to then go in as soon as you click onto that to show an image and a URL. So you really can drive engagement and you can really drive ROI. So this is how native actually works. You're matching the look and the feel of your particular app, which means that publishers are more likely to have some inventory available in their apps and not going to be as pernickety in terms of it's my user experience, I don't want to share that level of that level of advertising that's coming through. And this obviously allows DSPs to monetize those inventories. Social and gaming will become even closer. I mean, they're pretty close and tight at the moment, but they're going to become even closer because gaming is shared across multiple devices, multiple handsets. In this scenario, a family is playing a game. So we're seeing that there's going to be sort of a shift here. Retargeting is really key here. If you have a host of games, you have the ability to create games, then cross-promote those games according to the users that are using them. So if you know it's a game that's orientated more to females, you can cross-promote a new game that has a similar background to what you're trying to resonate with. The same thing when we talk about social bringing scale into the mix. This is your ability to go viral. Here's a great example of it, trying to bring a sort of virality when you're talking about Legoland in Manchester, who almost did a parody of Ellen. This one's quite important because Dong's game went from 0 to hero in a short space of time. And in this discussion here really is to talk about what Flappy Birds could have done and what they did do right at the beginning. This is talking about making sure you're topical and making sure you monetize on that. Flappy Birds brought X amount of money, revenue. I think it was 50K at one point a day. It was bringing in publisher revenue. This is the ability for you to be able to engage and strike at the right time for the right audience. And the last thing, of course, is data. Data becomes key. What we're saying here is let's take a look back into the future on why today is complicated. We're sharing way too much information. I mean, that's a good thing and that's a bad thing because with lots of information being shared through Twitter, through Facebook, there's a lot of noise. So we have to understand how do we take away the noise of what my friend had in the morning for breakfast versus what is actually going to make sense from an advertising and revenue orchestrated business. This person in particular played a game that was related to, shopping. Okay, therefore they may be interested in shopping, so we can retarget them with another shopping game or retarget them with a new product that's come out in the marketplace. So what we're trying to do is by bringing all of these layers together, you have the ability to at least try and not only monetize the inventory that you have, but utilize this in the same way to bring more users into your ecosystem. Thank you.
I actually have a question.
Sure.
I know programmatic is very big in gaming in terms of the advertiser side, so a lot of big game companies put a lot of money into buying users, especially when they can buy that more smartly. Some of it goes through DSPs, some of it goes directly on the networks.
Right.
Do you also see a lot of game publishers using it as a monetization channel? I mean, mostly the smaller ones, obviously.
That's a great question. It's been tough, to be honest with you, because of the user sort of engagement and how advertising can sort of affect the way that you're trying to play the game. But what we've seen happen is that you have a lot of freemium games available. There is a tipping point when you start losing users. And so what we've seen is with publishers, we're talking to them about making sure they segment those users who are in-app purchasers and not to affect the level of game engagement they have versus those users who are freemium players who've been playing for some time but don't actively buy. So by making sure that if you segment your audiences and segment your users, you can monetize on both sides, not just on one. So we are seeing gaming companies starting to really think about this and actually have dripped inventory into our exchange as a result. I mean, you can also have layers of targeting ability where you can say, okay, I don't want to have other gaming, advertisers showing up on my game as a publisher. So you have lots of controls and ability to make sure you completely manage that. Hi.
You mentioned about programmatic buying from a buying consumer acquisition point of view, and you have all DSPs at the back end. You mentioned that you can really optimize an impression by impression on real-time basis. So do you have a front-end tools for the developers to kind of really take care of that, and how does it happen?
That's a great question. We do. Obviously, in order for us to have these capabilities, we have to have a functioning ad server to be able to utilize all these different variables that can be interplayed. So we do offer an ad serving solution to all of our publishers they can go in, segment your inventory. You can have a funnel where you have X amount of inventory, let's say going to AdMob as an example, or to their own internal direct sales teams. We have capabilities built in that allow you to divide and conquer in terms of how you want to monetize and also how you want to interplay with someone who may be competitive to what you're trying to do as a gaming company. You obviously don't want to have other gaming companies advertise on yourself. You may not want to have, let's say the game is a specific game around shopping. You may not want to have ads showing up that resonate not so well with a shopping audience.
My question was more on the acquisition side rather than the publishing side. So
Sure.
if I want to acquire consumers, you mentioned in one of the slides that impression by impression you can go about doing it rather than giving a fixed chunk of money to somebody to kind of do that.
That actually happens on the DSP side of the business.
The DSP side. That's what I wanted to check because
That's right.
The impression which I got from the slide is that you guys can facilitate that, which is not the case.
That's correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.